So welcome to Mr. Neng Now once again. We've got all of our wonderful students here. This is us at Northwoods. We have a couple other schools joining us too.
Awesome, great. Nhớ dùng tờ bé ba của tú chân chạy J nữa. I'm really excited to be here, okay? Cú lúc bây giờ nắng, cú giờ mong thọ, cú nhớ tờ Madison, I come to lacrosse a lot, so I really like lacrosse, and whenever I come there, it makes me happy whenever I see a Hmong community. So when I first moved to the U.S. about 25 years ago, I was very young and Tokumu Gandana. Mo ipa minyo mong yung go ne je pe yang tan tho wo phong hi wo ge ta li sina, so I really like to mo minyo mong okay ne hai to lu wo ge shi gong to ge lo je wo ge na. So today I want to teach you and talk to you and teach a little bit about Hmong music. Đó khó ta chỉ nói je bé chấm nhỏ giàu cho lúa ya cũ thế cho lúa lên này thì thế thầu bé chỉ chua trà là ya chuan già chua canh chuan đông là nãy giờ. I want to tell you guys how special it is and how awesome this tradition and music to not just Hmong culture but everyone. The world is beginning to realize how creative and how special and how unique Hmong people are in Hmong language, because if you remember from yesterday, in the world there's 7,000 different languages, and there's only, of all those 7,000 languages, there's only one language in the whole entire world that mimics their speech with music, and that's Hmong. No other language does that as much as Hmong does. Some languages do it on some instruments, and they do it on some ways, like some drum languages in Africa do that, and some languages in Mesoamerica whistle their language, but Hmong can do all of that. So that is what makes Lu Hmong na. That is what makes Lu Hmong so special, so unique, and why Kusa encourage. I want to make sure that you all continue speaking Hmong, and to learn Hmong as you get older, and you có hai lu tao na mà có you take all the opportunities to hai lu Hmong có bé cho bong bé cho lu nữa, okay? So first cú yo bi e choi ra tra ý ra wa trăm lại nữa, ra trăm lại nó mà lúc nó bé hết tiệt trăm lại nó tra chỉ ni lúc flute này yo hầm lại chỉ ni to read nó. This is made of tong. Tong is a sort of copper and bronze mix. So cú yo la choi ra tra chỉ cú chua ta chỉ cú mà bia ra tra nữa bên mong hết tiệt bia nó mà bia ra mi chai tiệt bé cho lù tra nó là biến ra cho lù và bé hai được ta được giàu nó mù nữa, okay? And it's important to remember, if you remember from yesterday, when Hmong people play music, we're not just doing like other languages where we say bù lê là tao là chúa nó xin yo thọ bé chúa mà bé yo chủ hai lù Hmong nữa yo có chúa bù lê bù ya lù language xứ nó thì nó chỉ Hmong music nữa. Hmong music mà it always has words in there. So as you get older and you learn how to chua ta chuan ya chua canh na, you begin to hear those Hmong words. And so cú yo ai chua ra ta thì cú mà lo bia trâu nè about what cú chua cho lù là hai li cha nó nữa, okay? chua kono that was just really short, and I just make it up off the top of my head, and it sounds good, right? In Hmong music, whatever you want to say, whatever you want to say with your music, you play it, and it just magically sounds really good, and it magically is really kakashia. And that's not true for all music. If you take, let's say, a cello, a violin, a recorder, a saxophone, and you just play random notes, it won't sound good. But for Hmong music, whatever you want to play at that very moment, and that's what makes Hmong the most musical language in the world, because no other language can do that, and that's what makes Hmong so special and unique. So I want to encourage Neng Now to practice lùm mong là xiao hai lùm mong thầu nên một cho chế mà rồi con nè có chỉ có giờ cái ti vinh giàu màอยู่chủ có bỏ có giờ cái nè tai ở chỉ na. Try as hard as you can to speak only Hmong. I really want to challenge you to all in that. And okay? So that first part at the beginning, where Pechua, tu la, no. That, usually no. Always, usually we play at the beginning to be like, hey, listen to me, so that you can begin listening to that person. And then cha nia chan dun di mong no thì nêm long đó cha nia chan dun di mong no cha nia chan dun di mong là để của chúa mu cha nia chan dun di bùa kho này xia chi kho mong nó nè. Chỉ khó tất cả là chỉ bùa kho này xia chi kho mong yo nó nè. And that's the question, right? Kho yo bùa kho có xia yo nó nè. Now I want to ask you all a question, and I'm going to give you a little discussion time to speak next to the person next to you. If you speak Hmong, what do you think this word means? Or if you don't speak Hmong, ask someone who speaks Hmong what you think this word means. When Hmong people, when we say koshia, talk to the person, people around you. What do you think the word koshia means? Is there a word in English that explains that? So go ahead and talk to a friend next to you, a student next to you, and think about it for a few minutes. What do you think koshia means? You could just turn right next to the person. You could speak in Hmong, you could speak in English. If you're speaking to someone who might not speak Hmong, tell them what you think koshia means. If there's an English equivalent, or if there's a word in English that's close to the word or the expression koshia. Lu anki lo ya lu mi kai be de lo lu koshia noi mi ka bo mo lo lu da na na. De wa be bia kon da tai ne discuss kon da min ji de ku ma to ka lo bia e ku ma kien ne de ku e think li ja ne. Okay, can you raise your hand if you talked to someone about what ka think lo lu koshia means? Awesome. I see some hands being raised. Okay. So koshia, that's a hard word to translate into English. I'll tell you right now. And it was kind of a trick question. I think koshia na. Yeah, you can put your hands down. So thank you everyone for discussing that. We'll get to questions in a bit too, but I think koshia, it doesn't translate to English. There's no English word that translates koshia really well. And koshia is very powerful, is very healing, and is very good for us. Koshia can kind of mean you're feeling a little bit sad, but you gotta think about it. Na ko sama ko shia means your liver, or in English we would say your heart, right? Shia naman your liver on your heart. Your heart is being fixed, or your sadness is being fixed. And in English, there's not that word. So when we speak Hmong, it gives us access to these tools and these expressions that English doesn't have. And that's why I want to encourage you guys to keep speaking Hmong or any language that you may speak, because as you speak that language, it gives you a power and an ability and a way to think that not everyone has access to. Especially talk about Chota Chunyano. Again, Hmong is the only language in the entire world that does that. So when we begin to practice and relearn stuff like this, Mong like ability or a power, a special ability. So thầu này cho cá là cờ cho nó chỉ nữ give này hư chỉ nữa, okay. And before I play this instrument,你要一路站着chỉ tỷ đầu luôn chân giờ或被muốn giờ đầu ta或sát tỏ nó nữa. Now remember when I say thầu bé chua nè, it's not music, 你要hai luôn mong nè. So for example, 要กูchua,กูtụi mày luôn cầu mong tụi cho rong cầu nó nè. Cú tụi mê luôn đâu mong tụi cho rong đâu nó. Now those are all words. Ni chỉ要li lử hai lử neng lại chúa bù lê mờ lê lử tông dây nó na bé mong chúa mà bé chúa lùa. So when I was your age, I want to tell you a danang or a story. Sự chăng, sự hùa. No, Hmong has a lot of words for story. English, we might only have one word, which is story, but Hmong has daneng if it's like a folk tale story, neng if it's like a story about someone's life, shi hua if it's a story that you heard from someone else, and then su cheng if it's something that happened that you witnessed with your own eyes. So Hmong has like 4 words for story, which English doesn't also have. So I want you to encourage and keep learning Hmong, because I'm learning Hmong every day, just as I'm learning English, just as I'm learning Spanish. So Hmong it gives you access to more tools. But when I was your age. So when I was your age, I grew up in Madison. And thầm tao chỉ cần tao mà bé always hai lùm mong xin này giờ bé hai lùm mong là chị cho teacher bé hai lý trả lúc bé mua bé tu teacher or lần dân du mong nè lần du sao á. They were a little bit racist, and they would tell us to stop speaking Hmong whenever we spoke Hmong, and we were never saying anything bad. We were laughing, we were never saying anything bad, but they always tell us don't speak Hmong, and it made me feel really hurt and really sad inside. But we had a Hmong translator at that school, and his name was Mr. Her. So Mr. Her, one day we had this staff talent show, and all the staff had to show off a talent. And Mr. Her, he went up on stage, and what did he do? He played Hmong instruments, and in front of the whole school, he spoke Hmong through Hmong instruments. And the teachers, they didn't even know. They didn't know that he was speaking Hmong. And they said, oh, wow, that sounds pretty. And the same teachers that told me not to speak Hmong because they were kind of racist and they didn't want me to speak my own language, they were saying that the Hmong language was beautiful because it was being spoken. And they didn't know. So that was something that, for me, when I was your age, it was so empowering and so beautiful for me, is that our language was hidden and masked in a way, and it was presented in a way that not a lot of people knew. But it made me realize how special and how awesome Hmong music is. So when I say speak Hmong, you have to speak Hmong only, I just, at the end of the day, I want you to realize how powerful and how beautiful your language, your mother language is. And to go along with that, 熄火了呀，死蹭了，a different type of story, not one that happened to me, but a story, a 根据一下熄火根据a piece of history about Hmong people and Hmong ancestral homelands. 头诶蒙景鸟我，但是那被蒙湖的地球说from what we call China. Hmong people come from the place that everyone calls China, but Hmong people never called it China because we called it is the motherland or the ancestral lands. And back then, Hmong people were always a minority. So maybe you heard from your parents or your grandparents, oppressed Hmong and there was a time when Joshua had Hmong at there. Oh, you need Hmong na. So if you spoke Hmong, they'd cut your tongue off, right? They didn't want you to speak Hmong. They would just cut your tongue clean off with a knife. And that was a way to try to get rid of the Hmong language and the Hmong culture. So what did Hmong people do then? When we weren't allowed to speak our language, we played it on instruments because, again, no one knew that it was our language. And that's how smart and creative Hmong people were, because we were like, no, if you tell us a rule, we're just going to go around that rule, and we're going to do something that reminds us how great we are. So Hmong people put our language into music, and no one else in the world does that. We didn't want to copy anybody. We were creative and powerful and resilient. So if you look at music all around the world, right, there might be bands and there might be choirs and all these people play together and it looks really fun. And sometimes we might think about, oh, how come Hmong people don't have that? But we shouldn't think that. What we should think is, hey, how come they can't speak with their music like we can, And we got to think of both sides. We got to be like, hey, maybe we don't play in bands, but guess what? We could speak with our music, and we're the only people that could do that. Everybody plays in a band. Everyone sings in a choir. Hmong people were creative. We didn't want to copy anyone, so we didn't do that. So I want to remind you of all your history and your resilience, and that Hmong people, we come from brave people, brave grandparents, brave 你帶兒子噃yo，莫兩莫讓莫理解，俾聽咗no dashi no no. Okay, so at the end, if you get nothing else from my presentation, know that you come from a history that is powerful, that is great, that is proud, that is creative, that is awesome. And only when you learn and really embrace that and are truly proud of being Hmong can you contribute to your community and grow as an individual. And it's really important for me to teach as young people, because you guys have much more time on this planet than I do, than your teachers and your parents, and you have more opportunities to change it. So I really want to emphasize that, okay? That's not what I try minji of lu that one no. Lu no, I want to compare it to the Western recorder, okay? This is a recorder. It's a black recorder. You might have seen they have white recorders, green, purple, blue, transparent. They have all these colorful ones because it's made from plastic. This one is made from bamboo. These are very similar instruments, except that this instrument, what's really cool about it is that we can play on 4 octaves. So we can play different, we call them scales of music, high or low. And this one I think can only do 2 or 3, but this one we can do it on 4 octaves. So I'm going to demonstrate that by just playing the same note, but I'm going to change the amount of breath I blow, and that's going to change how the note sounds, okay? So here's the first one. Now I'm gonna blow a little bit harder. And now I'm gonna blow a little bit harder again. So I'm gonna start low, high, then high. So you can see how those triplets of notes sound differently, right? Now I'm gonna play the 4th one, which we usually don't use in Hmong music, but you can play it with this and it's like a super high. 如说我背的是上得几行了呢？蒙啊。So you can see how when I change my breath, it sounds different. And that really goes back to when you speak, what do you use, right? You speak, you use your lungs for air, you use your throat, and you use your mouth. So when you're speaking with an instrument, we have to control our breath just like when we're talking. That's why we want to put a lot of control into our breath, not just our fingers like we might with Western music, okay? So của chúa ý ra ta lù lù lúc nó có nêm long cho cả tàu mong music okay. So let me explain what I'm playing. So at the beginning, that's probably the only part of Hmong music that we might say is not real words. So remember that beginning? That common beginning. Those are words that they're words, they're Hmong sounds and they're words, but they don't really have a lot of meaning. In Hmong we call those lutaha. So in English, those are words that English doesn't really have either. They do, but not in the same sense that Hmong do. Like for example, the English word huh? Like when you're asking a question, huh? It's kind of like that word, but Hmong has a lot of those words. So, huh? It doesn't really mean anything, right? But the meaning is like it emphasizes the question again. But Hmong has a lot of those words. So, and that's one thing that makes Hmong music, Hmong language able to become music, and Hmong music able to become our language because we have a lot of those lutaha. Okay. Another example is when who's I don't know if you guys see this movie anymore, but can you guys raise your hand if you've ever seen the movie Nung Plai Thiên Zở, or if you heard about it? Yeah, good. I see a few hands out there. Yeah, 那只到晒的 movie Nung Plai Thiên Zở chỉ thầu nên một giờ chỉ hai có mom, có dad, rồi có bố, có yo, có your cousins, có your friend, sister, brother. Nên là sai on Nung Plai Thiên Zở nữa. Yeah, it's called very famous Hmong đan năng nè. So this is ý đại blong này, okay? So thầm Hmong mà bé chúa tầm blong into music and into our language, right? So remember I blew a little bit yesterday, but thầu bé chúa lúc học bóng blong nó nem long á. Cú chúa mà cú chúa học bóng bé hay tiệt. Bù bù shi chế nó bù bù shi chế nó này yo. That time it didn't go that loud, but again, bù bù shi chế. So when you hear those words, they don't really have meaning either, but it's a start. You have to lutaha ya vataku hai na yo. So when I come chua luta na, thầu của beginning của chua lu học bao đó nó mà như bé cho lutaha. So listen to it again. And then again, cô play y dạng gì. So this như chỉ chua mua cho lùi bé yếu cho lùi tiệt là bia,แต่是你lu học bao và bé bí y dạng cao thì bé bí领导那chỉ thầu bé chua ta thì bé mà mu chua bé cho lùi nè. So cú chua lên đại đại thì cú gầu mông nó giờ nó gầu mông nó gầu mông lỡ nên lòng khỏi nó gầu mông lỡ là chỉ là bé chứ bùa con này xía nó giờ bùa con này xía nó so lúc ta làm mình chua tao lo lu and I'm actually not really good at this instrument. I'm still learning this instrument every day because it's really tricky because it is very emphasis on your breath. So when chuan the sound, you might be hearing that. Sometimes when I play it, there's a few squeaks in there, and that's okay. I'm learning to play this instrument, and we have to be looking at music and everything we learn as a lifelong journey of always learning. Okay, ยัง有期末一努那个掉哦，古更出错呀，错呀，喏那有ยัง有。打理 everyday 嘛，那有煮了够个，那更煮多，那是呢。There's never a time when you know everything, and it's okay to be learning. I'm still learning every day. The cool thing with Hmong music is because it's a language, when you mess up, you can just keep playing, and it still sounds good. Because one, Hmong music and Hmong language is very tied, and Hmong music is very linguistic and Hmong language is very musical. And two, for example, when I talk to you like this, and if I say a word wrong, if I call this instead of calling it my phone, and I call it, oh, give me that book or give me that pager, uh, it's okay, right? And you'll just say, oh, you mean your phone, and then you'll just give it to me. And in Hmong music, it's like that too. Sometimes if we're playing and we mess up, it's just like when we're talking, we're like, oh, I just misspoke. Now I'm just going to go back and say it again. So it's not a big deal. Like in Western music, sometimes if you mess up in music, you feel like, oh my gosh, I just messed up and everyone's gonna know, and I didn't read the sheet music correctly. In Hmong, it's not like that. Okay, it's a philosophy of, hey, you're gonna mess up and it's okay. And if you mess up, just go back, do it better, fix it, and it's a good growing experience. So remember that for Hmong music, it teaches us that, and that's really important.
Mr. Neng, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. We have students that have some questions.
Yeah, I was just about to ask. You guys read my mind. I was just
Oh,
about
I'm
to
sorry.
ask if you have any questions.
We saw some of your videos that you put out, like how to say your name and stuff. And so they were like excited to ask you some questions. Could you talk a little bit about like growing up in Wisconsin and what that was like, and how you were able to be proud of your Hmong heritage, and then through your travels, you learned to incorporate maybe your American identity also? Could you talk about that a little bit and then answer some questions?
Yeah. So I think, I talked a little bit for Pata in Hmong now, mostly in Hmong a while ago, about school. We were a group of Hmong friends that sometimes when we spoke Hmong, our teachers told us not to speak Hmong, and we would get in trouble for speaking Hmong, right? So that was a really bad experience. I think people should be able to be themselves. So sometimes that was really bad when people told me to not speak Hmong, or that my language was not as good as English. And it wasn't until I was really old that I really realized that that's not true. We should embrace and encourage each other to be who we were put on this earth to be. And it's never good to make other people feel bad about themselves or feel ashamed of themselves. And if anyone does that to you, shame on them, and you should never feel bad about being yourself. And if we are to grow as America, a country where we embrace diversity and really share our culture and share who we are and grow and learn with our neighbors, then we have to say that's not okay. So a lot of times growing up in Wisconsin, 25 years ago, I didn't always feel proud of who I was. So if you ever feel like that, know that that shouldn't be the case. And if you know someone who's feeling bad about who they are, you should tell them that they shouldn't feel that way. And we always have to change and always grow for tomorrow. So I want to encourage everyone to be proud of who they are, especially dùng li chỉ muốn mong là ya mong chỉ chơi gì bây giờ li chỉ xả lộ mong là nó thì是那个主用写不写走写的那样梦木的当地了要木也被说嘛那天有了叫到梦路 community 他我叫诶都走才 J 的店呢 so I think I became really proud of who I was and it took me a really long time like over 10 years so longer than some of you have been alive. It took me really long to be proud of who I was, but as the world changes and becomes more open and connected, if you get the chance to travel ever, I encourage you to travel because it's going to make more friends for you across the world. Now, everywhere where I go in the world, I have friends and I have homes to stay at, and that makes me really happy and proud of who I am because I have friends who like me for who I am. So make sure that you make good friends, that you stick to the right communities that are helping you, and hang out with the correct people. Any other questions right off the bat?
I can ask you some of the questions we have here, and then if
Oh,
anyone else from other schools have questions, they can put them in the chat and then we can see them. Somebody here asked, what foods did you try when you first came to Wisconsin?
You know, I was really little when I came, so I I think I just probably ate food I ate today and the same food as you guys eat as well at home. It wasn't anything weird. I think sometimes we like to think that when people first come to this country, they have these big shocking experiences, but we have to really realize again that not everyone's not that different from us. So when we try new foods and stuff, but it's not necessarily a weird or crazy experience, or other people, whether they're new immigrants to this country or whether they come from different countries, they're not eating different foods and they're very similar to us. But great question. I see a question in the chat that asking how many Hmong instruments are out there. That's a really good question. I've never counted them, but I know there's a lot of instruments, and especially now, these aren't the only Hmong instruments. Now Hmong people, we can play piano and we can play guitar and we can play all of those instruments too that are kind of universal instruments that everyone plays now. So this is not the only type of music. There's Hmong hip hop and Hmong rap and Hmong pop music, and then there's this, which is traditional classical Hmong music, just like there is hip hop that's in English and rap that's in English, but there's also classical music and old English music. So there's all these different genres of music. I think for traditional Hmong instruments, well, there's I'll just name them off and then we can count as well as learn what different instruments are called. So we have this one, which is Tam Blai, remember? So Tam Blai, Da Lei Lei, then there's the Dan Jiao, there's the Da Lin Yao, there's the Dan Blong, All Look Ho, and then there's the Dan Blong Bei Look Ho, then there's obviously Da Kang, right? Everyone knows Da Kang. Then there's Dan Ya, there's Dai Blong, there's Lung Gao Non Ya. So that's 10 that I just named off. And there's probably a lot more that I'm not thinking about. So definitely more than 10. But if you keep thinking, I think there's a lot of Hmong instruments, just like there are a lot of English instruments or Spanish instruments or any other culture. And sometimes people make new instruments too. So every day we're adding to that. So don't think that there's a specific set number, especially when it comes to people and culture, because we're always growing and redefining what it means to be Hmong or what it means to be American. Anyone else have any good questions?
My student here just asked, what countries do you have friends in?
Ooh, I have a lot of friends in Latin American countries, so the countries south of the United States. So Mexico, Panama, Costa Rica, Colombia, Chile, and that's because I speak Spanish. So if you learn another language, you get to travel other places and make friends. It's really hard to make a Spanish speaking friend if you don't speak Spanish and you can't talk to people. So that's why I encourage you to also learn languages, whether it be Hmong or Spanish or French or Chinese or Japanese, whatever language it is, learn it so that you can make friends. You know, you can't really be a friend with someone if you don't talk to them. So that's why, especially if you speak Hmong already, the younger you are, continue speaking Hmong so you can make Hmong friends in other countries. The cool thing about Hmong is that there are a lot of Hmong speakers everywhere in the world. So there's Hmong speakers in America, like you and I. There's Hmong speakers in Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Myanmar, China, France, Australia. So if you speak Hmong, you can make friends in all of these countries. And that's not true for every language. Some languages, most of their speakers might be in one country. So another cool, awesome thing about Hmong is that it allows you to travel around the world. So great question. So I have friends in Latin American speaking countries because I speak Spanish, and then I also have a lot of Hmong friends in Laos, Thailand, Vietnam, China, Australia, France. So everywhere I go, I get friends to hang out with, and it makes me really happy. And that's why I wear this shirt because it reminds me to be happy and to keep doing those things. We have another question. Panet from Pane Lore. Ms. Lore, what have you visited Laos? What was life like? I have visited Laos. Laos is really, really, it's a great experience. I think everyone should go there. So my grandparents were born there, my parents were born there, and probably a lot of your parents and grandparents were born in Laos. So it's always nice to go back and to understand what our parents and grandparents reminisce about and what they remember and the stories they tell us. Uh, and Laos is changing, there's a lot, just like in the US is very different. Depending on where you go in Laos is very different too. So in Laos there are big cities, just bigger than the capital Vientiane. There's big buildings there, and there's a lot more people than there are in Madison or La Crosse. So there's huge cities, and there's also very tiny villages, just like in Wisconsin. There might be some villages you drive through that are only 50 or 100 people. In Laos, there's the same thing. Some villages, maybe 50 people, 20 people even, and then there are big cities with, like Vientiane has like 700,000 people or something like that. So it's important to know that whatever country you go to, there's a lot of different experiences too, and we shouldn't categorize and think that, oh, one country only has one way of living.
We have another question here. What do you hope to accomplish with making your videos, and what inspired you to teach Hmong music?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, what inspired me to speak, not speak, yes, to speak, but to teach Hmong music and Hmong lu ta lu ya lu teng cá lì kể chai nó mà, is because I see young folks like you, and I want you all to be proud of who you are, and I want you to know that you come from special people, special culture, special history, and that your language does something that no one else their language can or was ever able to do. So I really want you to know how special it is to be Hmong. And when I see that, it encourages me to keep telling people about Hmong music and to tell people about these experiences I have, whether it's traveling or making an instrument or playing an instrument. I really want people to know, like, hey, this is an experience that's worth sharing, because Hmong music, Hmong language is worth sharing. And that's why I make videos, and that's why I talk, because when I was growing up and I was your age, sometimes 姑姑只使用 Hmong 啦，哟，都考我了，平时做 Hmong 嘅我都估是怎么啦， 用力我估计啥样梦诶，估计怎么啦？但是 that was the wrong way to think, you know. 给估啥了嗨，估啥了我 I do like role model for young students like you guys and to tell you that it's very special to be Hmong. Remember my story about my teacher, Mr. Her, how he empowered me because he showed me that you could speak Hmong in front of a whole school, and those teachers that Hmong they wouldn't even know. So I want to be like Mr. Her, who empowered and changed my life. I want to really empower you all and show you that when you grow up, you all can be role models and leaders in your community because youth leaders are who change the future. Mm, yeah, but those are, I see, great questions. So keep asking, raise your hands and ask questions to your teachers, and we could just keep talking a little bit about it. How do Hmong people make instruments out of bamboo? Well, it depends um, what type of instrument you want to make, but we can make instruments, you know, out of metal as well and plastics, just like we do with the recorder I showed here that's made of plastic. Now Hmong people can also make flutes out of plastic, but I just like bamboo, so I choose the bamboo ones. Just like there are wooden violins, there are also plastic violins, there are even metal violins, and now there are also metal Hmong flutes as well. So there's always different ways to make an instrument. I like bamboo because I think it's pretty. And just like how most people like wooden violins or wooden cellos because wood is really pretty. Um, but there's definitely no reason why you can't make it from plastic, just like people do. I'll just use this one as an example, which is bamboo, but we cut this hole here, and it's very similar to this hole on the recorder. It's hard to see because this recorder is black, but um, this hole right here and this hole are basically very similar. And when you blow into here, it's very similar to blowing in this part of your recorder. And when the air comes out of this hole, that's what makes the sound. And then we can just drill holes in the bamboo, and that'll allow us to change our notes by changing our fingers. Yesterday you saw that I had that little flute, which I don't have here right now, but oh, I have one right here, I think. So I had this little one, right? And we changed the notes not just by our fingers, but also with our hand. So that this also allows us to change how the notes sound. On the Patakuchoma, one other reason Hmong people chua music no a lot of right? It was our love languages. So if you've ever had a crush on someone at your school, if you ever had a crush, who's brave and can raise their hand if they ever had a crush? Just kidding. Hey, wow, a lot of people raise their hand. Hey, so if you ever have a crush on someone, right? It's really hard to go to that person and be like, I think you're really good looking and I have a crush on you, right? You don't just say that. That's really weird, right? I see a lot of people laughing because it's a funny thing to talk about. So you can't just say that. I mean, you can, but it's weird, right? So instead of going to someone and being like, oh, you would say that on the da, right? So it's hard to say that, so we just say that through our music. So I say, if I say, you know, "Gu tu meng luang gao, tu zhe zhong gao no na, no na, nem long gu tu meng luang gao, tu zhe zhong gao no." Can you guys hear that? Can you hear how the notes and how I sing it? It sounds similar. So I'm gonna do it one more time. Gu tu meng luang gao, tu zhe zhong gao no. And that allows us to say those things that are really hard to say through our music. Because sometimes when you say it on music, it makes it easier to say instead of going to someone you really like and be like, oh, I think you're really good looking and I have a big crush on you. Hmong people say that through our music because we're creative like that. Miss Glenn says, what is your favorite Hmong music and instrument? Or that was asked by a student. I thank you for that question. I really like a lot of Hmong music, and some modern Hmong music is pretty nice too. Um, if anyone listens to my friend David Yang, he just came out with a pretty cool song a couple weeks ago. That's currently on my repeat, and it's like he does like pop music. So there's Hmong pop music too, and there's a lot of artists in Laos and the U.S. making some new styles of Hmong music that I don't really necessarily like, but I think it's really cool that they're doing new music. So I want you all to be brave if you want to be an artist, if you want to be a musician. I want you to be creative so that you make new things. Even if you want to be like a scientist, you can only be a great scientist if you're creative and you can discover new things. And that takes creativity, whether you're going to be a musician, an artist, a scientist, a doctor. Doctors have to be creative to cure sicknesses and cure diseases. So creativity is, in Hmong we would say, ลูกhọc bầu นะ okay 你要ลูกhọc bầu 呢 thì đừng mạnh thua mua đánh blong tu cá lun gì 呢 so it's the seed, it's the base, creativity, and that becomes the stem that carries you through life and births your sprouts and your leaves and your flowers. So creativity is ลูกhọc bầu to everything. Someone said, are you going to write a book on Hmong culture? I don't know if I'll write a book on Hmong culture. I think I'll write a book on Hmong music. Sometimes if you have to focus on one thing, and I think my focus is Hmong music, because not because you have to focus on one thing, but if you really like one thing, like me, Hmong music, then you should focus on that one thing. You don't have to focus on other things. If you really like dinosaurs, then you should focus on researching dinosaurs. If you really like airplanes, focus on airplanes. So these are great questions. You guys are coming with really good questions. Any other more? Someone asked a good question here, Miss Glenn's. Will you write your own music? Yeah. So whoever asked that, thank you. I think that's a really great question, because for Hmong music, almost every song is kind of rewritten. So every song you have to be creative. Every time ku chua lu ta no, every time ku chua lu ta no, or ja ta no. I remember yesterday when I even made this paper flute. When I play all of these instruments in Hmong, we just whatever ก็สาหายนะแต่ก็จะรีหายเกี่ยซื้อหน่อยอ่ะ. So we have to be really creative, and every song is different because it comes truly from your heart, and it comes about what you want to talk about and play at that very moment. It takes, when people are so creative that it takes, literally 1 second to think about something, to say it, to play it with our fingers, and then to blow it into the instrument and say those words. That's how creative we are, and it always sounds good. It always sounds really kakashia and really soothing, right? Sometimes in Western music, we like to think that, we have to have a sheet music, and we have to read this sheet music and read the music on a piece of paper, and we have to play it exactly like that, and we have to practice a million times. But for Hmong music, it's not necessarily like that, because and then in a way it gets rid of the music, it gets rid of the expression, where you're just playing what's on a piece of paper, what someone told you to play. But Hmong music is really beautiful in that whatever you want to do and whatever you want to say, you have creative freedom and expression to do that. So in a way, I write my music every time I play this. Every time I play an instrument is different, and it sounds different, and that's what's really cool about Hmong music too. When we play this, it's not lyrics. It's not lyrics. That's one thing you should know about Hmong music, is that it's not lyrics like it is in Western music. not N-O-T, not music or not lyrics. It is actual words that we're playing, okay? So mong mong gu tu mei long gao mong mong, đó. So I might play that, and another top player, maybe, you know, if your grandpa, your grandma, they might have never heard that line in their entire life, but they'll be able to hear that and they'll be able to say, oh, 你戳嘛，你还记得哦，我都没弄够，都就用够啊，忙，不可能写，呢？So they will hear something that they might never hear in their entire life, but they'll know that that's what I'm saying on Lutano. That's what makes Hmong music really cool. It's not like when we listen to Western music and we say, oh, I don't know the lyrics to that because I've never heard that song. Hmong music is not like that. If you listen to 一张高奏呢，個不包魯丹呢，就來戳你家了，咁浪到就說呢，就個人包佢哋哦，就魯丹啊嘛，你戳着浪高咯，然後你戳着浪到咯，你戳着嘅話，只得到頭咯，you know, is really powerful in that sense. So if you've ever been to, I'll tell you a little bit of history too, and because I know we're getting to the end, but this part is also really important, and I think it's something that all Hmong kids should hear because it's really important to your history. And when I was your age and my parents and grandparents told me this, it was a good reminder for me to this day that Hmong history is important and we have to learn our own history. There's a saying by, I think it was Marcus Garvey, and he said, a tree without, or I wrote it down here, but he said, a tree or a person without knowledge of the history is like a tree without roots. So I don't want you all to be a tree without roots. I want you to be a big, powerful tree that grows. So remember my story about Ta'ua, Hmong nhớ tới chờ suối là mua bém lại chỉ bỏ chê na. When we spoke Hmong, they would cut our tongue off to get rid of Hmong people. Ta'u, when Hmong people were also nhớ tỏ our homelands and shuo tuần tàu tua bê na, it wasn't just that là mua bém lại chỉ bỏ chê and là mua bé okay, right? Là yua bé là okay na. They also did other stuff like if you Hmong cho babies, Hmong cho mio na, they'll steal those babies, kidnap those babies, and like cho mu chúa đài là chúa chó là mua mong mu okay là mua mong pie là pie bé cho organs nó mu mua, and they did that, and through all of that Hmong people survived. And if you ever been to a Hmong funeral, thọ bé chúa canh na, we chúa canh when no one knows what happens when you die, right? No one knows for sure, but Hmong people, we believe that and they travel back to our homelands, not just a physical journey, but we also have to, our spirits have to go through time. It's a physical and a temporal journey. So when we chokeng to funeral, when we also, the chokeng, the Tang language, it tells the deceased person to, hey, when you go back through history, they're gonna đau có đùa, rồi yo cho cá chỉ rõ cho you, chỉ thầu lời chỉ rõ cho you, nó chỉ có yo ô lý trả có thể yo đau yang lời, có thể yo muốn thiệt tàu có bỏ có giờ, nó our music, it reminds us to be resilient, brave people and brave soldiers, and to carry on our history and to really, you know, tie those roots of ourselves so that we can have branches full of leaves and full of fruit and full of happiness to share with our community. So that's why when I do work like this, I want to encourage to always hai lu mong and learn because in the future, that's going to be more important to you than you realize. You're never going to be a successful person if you're not a happy person. You can make $1 billion, but if you're not happy, then why should you even live, right? And you can only be happy if you're content and fulfilled about who you are, and you're only really happy if you can contribute to your community, have a lot of friends, and have a lot of happiness around you. So I want to finish this. I know I only have a few minutes, but I'm going to tell it really fast. Mong ra đánh hàng nữa, okay? This is my favorite đánh hàng. And I'm going to tell Mong ra đánh hàng not to you, and it tells you the secret to happiness, what Hmong people think is the secret to happiness, okay? So bu thổ u chè du chỉ tế trâu nè chè mua ít tụi mình nhuận chua nè chè tụi mình nhuận chua nó mà nếu ở mua ở tụi mình nhuận chua nè ít tụi ăn con chua thế ít tụi trâu chua nè chè con chua thiên trâu chua cũng mua cho mông gọi là xin thiệt tàu chè gọi là xí dúa lại chè gọi là xí dúa chè con chua thiên trâu chua một cứ everyday nè chỉ chọn hu mà là một cứ còn cái tàu món nọ xíuแต่ฉันก็ปลัวๆนะก็chỉ mua family จะchỉ mua cái tin năng cha chỉ mua vinh giàu chỉ mua nhà chỉ mua gì vậy cái nhỏ ý xin năng lòng cái yêu chỉ tao mình nhỏ nè chỉ nu chỉ con chua tên con chua là lâu ta kể ó chỉ cái là lâu ta kể chỉ cái yếu to chỉ cái mua cứ chỉ cái thiệt tao tu sâu nhỏ bút tịt trong nữa ya chỉ tu sâu mà trâu gì là they locked up sâu and tu sâu là hai trong cái gì là mỗi ai lo khi của nó lúc bao giờ nó là giờ này là đầu tao của nó chê của giờ này xã tao đã chỉ chê của giờ mua cái trong này nữa, okay? So whatever you want, I'm gonna give 3 things to you, 3 wishes, like the story of the genie in Western, stories. This was very similar to that. So the Shao said, I'll give you 3 wishes, whatever you want, to make you happy. And enjoy that one, enjoy. What did they say? They say first wish, là lâu chỉ mua giò là chê thọ có ô có cho cái lùa lùa是写多中高中头这手脚个地这 bam 个这里是写这种高这种头lùa多 but what happened 我讲过这里是写 their heads reached all the way to the clouds, they were so tall they turned to giants, and then they were really sad and they yo lo đâu and second wish người ta sao lo thầu là chỉ có and Shao waved his hand. Boom! Now they got small, but they got so small. They got small like the ants. They were so tiny that not smaller than any human. So they said, "Oh my gosh, we just wasted our second wish." Now so what were their last wish? They said, one day my Lord ho, that's not made ho了啫。佢頭個就解容易呀，是咯。So their third wish, they were old again. They were old and no family and sad and poor and on their deathbed. So that's not they just wasted 3 wishes, right? So what should have they wished for? Hmong people say if they wanted to live a happy, fulfilling life, their first wish should have been for family and friends. Then their second wish should have been for a home and a place to stay. And then their third wish, they could have wished for if they wanted money, if they wanted a nice car or whatever, they could have wished for that. But the reason why I'm telling this story to you is because it's important about building a community and being happy and living a good life, is to encourage you guys to build that community and to change the world and to change all the communities, not just the Hmong community, but America in general. If you're a dancer, your dancer community. If you're in a band, your band, and all of that. So I know we're on time, and I made that story short, but thank you all today for giving me your undivided attention. Anything else, Miss Glens, before we go?
Someone had a very important question. Do you have a YouTube channel?
I do. It's just Neng Now. I don't really use it, but you can go see some of my short videos on there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Chào nè. Bye. Xin chào nè. Okay, xin chào. Bye. Thank you, everybody.